Hi there and welcome. Glad to have you joining today again for our daily reading from the Oz books. Today we'll be reading chapters 8 and 9 of Glinda of Oz by L. Frank Baum. If you remember yesterday's reading, Ozma and Dorothy found the Flatheads and met the Supreme Dictator, but he refused to acknowledge Ozma as ruler and still was going to attack the Skeezers. He also tried to imprison Ozma and Dorothy, but Ozma turned them both invisible, and they were able to escape and make it to the island where they could see the island of the Skeezers. That's where we're picking it up here today with chapter 8. Queen Kuia. Princess Ozma considered the situation gravely. Then she tied her handkerchief to her wand and, standing at the water's edge, waved the handkerchief like a flag as a signal. For a time they could observe no response. "I don't see what good that will do," said Dorothy. "Even if the Skeezers are on that island and see us, and know we're friends, they haven't any boats to come and get us." But the Skeezers didn't need boats, as the girls soon discovered. For on a sudden an opening appeared at the base of the palace, and from the opening came a slender shaft of steel, reaching out slowly but steadily across the water in the direction of the place where they stood. To the girls, this steel arrangement looked like a triangle, and the base was nearest the water. It came toward them in the form of an arch, stretching out from the palace until its end reached the bank and rested there, while the other end still remained on the island. Then they saw that it was a bridge consisting of a steel footway just broad enough to walk on, and two slender guide rails, one on either side, which were connected to the footway by steel bars. The bridge looked rather frail, and Dorothy feared it would not bear their weight, but Ozma at once called, "Come on," and started to walk across, holding fast to the rail on either side. So Dorothy summoned up her courage and followed after. Before Ozma had taken 3 steps, she halted, and so forced Dorothy to halt, for the bridge was again moving and returning to the island. "We need not walk after all," said Ozma. So they stood still in their places and let the steel bridge draw them onward. Indeed, the bridge drew them well into the glass-domed building which covered the island, and soon they found themselves standing in a marble room where 2 handsomely dressed young men stood on a platform to receive them. Ozma at once stepped from the end of the bridge to the marble platform, followed by Dorothy, and then the bridge disappeared with a slight clang of steel, and a marble slab covered the opening from which it had emerged. The 2 young men bowed profoundly to Ozma, and one of them said, "Queen Kuio bids you welcome, O strangers. Her Majesty is waiting to receive you in her palace." "Lead on," said Ozma with dignity. But instead of leading on, the platform of marble began to rise, carrying them upward through a square hole above which just fitted it. A moment later, they found themselves within the great glass dome that covered almost all of the island. Within this dome was a little village with houses, streets, gardens, and parks. The houses were of colored marbles, prettily designed, with many stained glass windows, and the streets and gardens seemed well cared for. Exactly under the center of the lofty dome was a small park filled with brilliant flowers, with an elaborate fountain, and facing this park stood a building larger and more imposing than the others. Toward this building the young men escorted Ozma and Dorothy. On the streets and in the doorways or open windows of the houses were men, women, and children, all richly dressed. These were much like other people in different parts of the land of Oz, except that instead of seeming merry and contented, they all wore expressions of much solemnity or of nervous irritation. They had beautiful homes, splendid clothes, and ample food, but Dorothy at once decided something was wrong with their lives, and they were not happy. She said nothing, however, but looked curiously at the Skeezers. At the entrance of the palace, Ozma and Dorothy were met by two other young men in uniform and armed with queer weapons that seemed about halfway between pistols and guns, but were like neither. Their conductors bowed them and left, and the two in uniforms led the girls into the palace. In a beautiful throne room, surrounded by a dozen or more young men and women, sat the Queen of the Skeezers, Coo ee oh. She was a girl who looked older than Ozma or Dorothy, 15 or 16 at least, and although she was elaborately dressed as if she were going to a ball, she was too thin and plain of feature to be pretty. But evidently, Queen Coo ee oh did not realize this fact, for her air and manner betrayed her as a proud and haughty person, and with a high regard for her own importance. Dorothy at once decided she was snippy, and that she would not like Queen Coo ee oh as a companion. The Queen's hair was as black as her skin was white, and her eyes were black too. The eyes, as she calmly examined Ozma and Dorothy, had a suspicious and unfriendly look in them. But she said quietly, "I know who you are, for I have consulted my magic oracle, which told me that one calls herself Princess Ozma, the ruler of all the land of Oz, and the other is Princess Dorothy of Oz, who came from a country called Kansas. I know nothing of the land of Oz, and I know nothing of Kansas." "Why, this is the land of Oz!" cried Dorothy. "It's a part of the land of Oz, anyhow, whether you know it or not." "Oh, indeed," answered Queen Coo ee oh scornfully. "I suppose you will claim next that this Princess Ozma, ruling the land of Oz, rules me?" "Of course," returned Dorothy. "There's no doubt of it." The Queen turned to Ozma. "Do you dare make such a claim?" she asked. By this time, Ozma had made up her mind as to the character of this haughty and disdainful creature, whose self-pride evidently led her to believe herself superior to all others. "I did not come here to quarrel with your Majesty," said the girl ruler of Oz quietly. "What and who I am is well established, and my authority comes from the fairy queen Lurline, of whose band I was a member when Lurline made all Oz a fairyland. There are several countries and several different peoples in this broad land, each of which has its separate rulers, kings, emperors, and queens. But all these render obedience to my laws and acknowledge me as the supreme ruler. If other queens and kings are fools, that does not interest me in the least," replied Queen Coo ee oh disdainfully. "In the land of the Skeezers, I alone am supreme. You are impudent to think that I would defer to you or to anyone else." "Let us not speak of this now, please," answered Ozma. "Your island is in danger, for a powerful foe is preparing to destroy it." "Pah! The Flatheads, I do not fear them. Their supreme dictator is a sorcerer. My magic is greater than his. Let the Flatheads come. They will never return to their barren mountain top. I will see to that." Ozma did not like this attitude, for it meant that the Skeezers were eager to fight the Flatheads, and Ozma's object in coming here was to prevent fighting and induce the two quarrelsome neighbors to make peace. She was also greatly disappointed in Coo ee oh, for the reports of Sudik had led her to imagine the Queen more just and honorable than were the Flatheads. Indeed, Ozma reflected that the girl might be better at heart than her self-pride and overbearing manner indicated, and in any event, it would be wise not to antagonize her, but to try to win her friendship. "I do not like wars, your Majesty," said Ozma. "In the Emerald City, where I rule thousands of people, and in the countries near the Emerald City, where thousands more acknowledge my rule, there is no army at all, because there is no quarreling and no need to fight. If differences arise between my people, they come to me and I judge the cases and award justice to all. So when I learned that there might be a war between two faraway people of Oz, I came here to settle the dispute and adjust the quarrel." "No one asked you to come," declared Queen Coo ee oh. "It is my business to settle this dispute, not yours. You say my island is a part of the land of Oz, which you rule, but that is all nonsense, for I've never heard of the land of Oz nor of you. You say you are a fairy, and that fairies gave you command over me. I don't believe it. What I do believe is that you are an impostor and have come here to stir up trouble among my people, who are already becoming difficult to manage. You two girls may even be spies of the vile Flatheads, for all I know, and may be trying to trick me. But understand this," she added proudly, rising from her jeweled throne to confront them. "I have magic powers greater than any fairy possesses, and greater than any Flathead possesses. I am a Kumbric witch, the only Kumbric witch in the world, and I fear the magic of no other creature that exists. You say you rule thousands. I rule 101 Skeezers, but every one of them trembles at my word. Now that Ozma of Oz and Princess Dorothy are here, I shall rule 103 subjects, for you also shall bow before my power. More than that, in ruling you, I also rule the thousands you say you rule." Dorothy was very indignant at this speech. "I've got a pink kitten that sometimes talks like that," she said. "But after I give her a good whipping, she doesn't think so high and mighty after all. If you only knew who Ozma is, you'd be scared to death to talk to her like that." Queen Coo ee oh gave the girl a supercilious look. Then she turned again to Ozma. "I happen to know," she said, "that the Flatheads intend to attack us tomorrow, but we are ready for them. Until the battle is over, I shall keep you two strangers prisoners on my island, from which there is no chance for you to escape." She turned and looked around the band of courtiers who stood silently around her throne. "Lady Aurex," she continued, singling out one of the young women, "take these children to your house and care for them, giving them food and lodging. You may allow them to wander anywhere under the great dome, for they are harmless. After I have attended to the Flatheads, I will consider what next to do with these foolish girls." She resumed her seat, and Lady Aurex bowed low and said in a humble manner, "I obey your Majesty's commands." Then to Ozma and Dorothy she added, "Follow me," and turned to leave the throne room. Dorothy looked to see what Ozma would do. To her surprise, and a little to her disappointment, Ozma turned and followed Lady Aurex. So Dorothy trailed after them, but not without giving a parting, haughty look toward Queen Coo ee oh, who had her face turned the other way and did not see the disapproving look. Chapter 9. Lady Aurex. Lady Aurex led Ozma and Dorothy along a street to a pretty marble house near to one edge of the great glass dome that covered the village. She did not speak to the girls until she had ushered them into a pleasant room, comfortably finished, nor did any of the solemn people they met on the street venture to speak. When they were seated, Lady Aurex asked if they were hungry, and finding they were, summoned a maid and ordered food to be brought. This Lady Aurex looked to be about 20 years old, although in the land of Oz, where people have never changed in appearance since the fairies made it a fairyland, where no one grows old and dies, it is always difficult to say how many years anyone has lived. She had a pleasant, attractive face, even though it was solemn and sad as the faces of all the Skeezers seemed to be, and her costume was rich and elaborate, as became a lady-in-waiting upon the Queen. Ozma had observed Lady Aurex closely, and now asked her, in a gentle tone, "Do you, also, believe me to be an impostor?" "I dare not say," replied Lady Aurex in a low tone. "Why, are you afraid to speak freely?" inquired Ozma. "The Queen punishes us if we make remarks that she does not like." "Are we not alone, then, in this house?" "The Queen can hear everything that is spoken on this island, even the slightest whisper," declared Lady Aurex. "She is a wonderful witch, as she has told you, and it is folly to criticize her or disobey her commands." Ozma looked into her eyes and saw that she would like to say more, if she dared. So she drew from her bosom her silver wand, and, having muttered a magic phrase in a strange tongue, she left the room and walked slowly around the outside of the house, making a complete circle and waving her wand in mystic curves as she walked. Lady Oryx watched her curiously, and, when Ozma had again entered the room and seated herself, she asked, "What have you done?" "I've enchanted this house in such a manner that Queen Coo ee oh and all her witchcraft cannot hear one word we speak within the magic circle I have made," replied Ozma. "We may now speak freely and as loudly as we wish, without fear of the Queen's anger." Lady Oryx brightened at this. "Can I trust you?" she asked. "Everybody trusts Ozma," exclaimed Dorothy. "She is true and honest, and your wicked queen will be sorry she insulted the powerful ruler of all the land of Oz." "The Queen does not know me yet," said Ozma. "But I want you to know me, Lady Oryx, and I want you to tell me why you and all the Skeezers are unhappy. Do not fear Coo ee oh's anger, for she cannot hear a word we say, I assure you." Lady Oryx was thoughtful a moment. Then she said, "I shall trust you, Princess Ozma, for I believe you are what you say you are, our supreme ruler. If you knew the dreadful punishments our queen inflicts upon us, you would not wonder we are so unhappy. The Skeezers are not bad people. They do not care to quarrel and fight, even with their enemies, the Flatheads. But they are so cowed and fearful of Coo ee oh that they obey her slightest word, rather than suffer her anger." "Hasn't she any heart, then?" asked Dorothy. "She never displays mercy. She loves no one but herself," asserted Lady Oryx. But she trembled as she said it, as if afraid even yet of her terrible queen. "That's pretty bad," said Dorothy, shaking her head gravely. "I see you've a lot to do here, Ozma, in this forsaken corner of the land of Oz. First place, you've got to take the magic away from Queen Coo ee oh and from that awful Sudic, too. My idea is that neither of them is fit to rule anybody, because they're cruel and hateful. So you'll have to give the Skeezers and Flatheads new rulers to teach all their people that they're a part of the land of Oz, and must obey, above all, the lawful ruler, Ozma of Oz. Then, when you've done that, we can go back home again." Ozma smiled at her little friend's earnest counsel, but Lady Oryx said in an anxious tone, "I am surprised that you suggest these reforms, while you are yet prisoners on this island and in Coo ee oh's power. That these things should be done, there is no doubt, but just now a dreadful war is likely to break out, and frightful things may happen to us all. Our queen has such conceit that she thinks she can overcome the Sudic and his people, but it is said Sudic's magic is very powerful, although not as great as that possessed by his wife Aurora before Coo ee oh transformed her into a golden pig." "I don't blame her very much for doing that," remarked Dorothy, "for the Flatheads were wicked to try to catch your beautiful fish, and the witch Aurora wanted to poison all the fishes in the lake." "Do you know the reason?" asked the Lady Oryx. "I don't suppose there was any reason, except just wickedness," replied Dorothy. "Tell us the reason," said Ozma earnestly. "Well, your Majesty, once, a long time ago, the Flatheads and the Skeezers were friendly. They visited our island, and we visited their mountain, and everything was pleasant between the two peoples. At that time, the Flatheads were ruled by 3 adepts in sorcery, beautiful girls who were not Flatheads, but had wandered to the Flat Mountain and made their home there. These 3 adepts used their magic only for good, and the mountain people gladly made them their rulers. They taught the Flatheads how to use their canned brains and how to work metals into clothing that would never wear out, and many other things that added to their happiness and content. Coo ee oh was our queen then, as now, but she knew no magic, and so had nothing to be proud of. But the 3 adepts were very kind to Queen Coo ee oh. They built for us this wonderful dome of glass and our houses of marble, and taught us to make beautiful clothing and many other things. Coo ee oh pretended to be very grateful for these favors, but it seems that all the time she was jealous of the three adepts and secretly tried to discover their arts of magic. In this, she was more clever than anyone suspected. She invited the three adepts to a banquet one day, and while they were feasting, Coo ee oh stole their charms and magical instruments and transformed them into three fishes: a goldfish, a silverfish, and a bronze fish. While the poor fishes were gasping and flopping helplessly on the floor of the banquet room, one of them said reproachfully, "You will be punished for this, Coo ee oh, for if one of us dies or is destroyed, you will become shriveled and helpless, and all your stolen magic will depart from you." Frightened by this threat, Coo ee oh at once caught up the three fish and ran with them to the shores of the lake, where she cast them into the water. This revived the three adepts, and they swam away and disappeared. "I myself witnessed this shocking scene," continued Lady Aurex, "and so did many other Skeezers. The news was carried to the Flatheads, who then turned from friends to enemies. The Sudic and his wife Rora were the only ones on the mountain who were glad the three adepts had been lost to them, and they at once became rulers of the Flatheads and stole their canned brains from others to make themselves more powerful. Some of the adepts' magic tools had been left on the mountain, and these Rora seized, and by the use of them she became a witch. The result of Coo ee oh's treachery was to make both the Skeezers and the Flatheads miserable instead of happy. Not only were the Sudic and his wife cruel to their people, but our queen at once became proud and arrogant and treated us very unkindly. All the Skeezers knew she had stolen her magic powers, and so she hated us and made us humble ourselves before her and obey her slightest word. If we disobeyed or did not please her, or if we talked about her when we were in our own homes, she would have us dragged to the whipping post in her palace and lashed with knotted cords. That is why we fear her so greatly." This story filled Ozma's heart with sorrow and Dorothy's heart with indignation. "I now understand," said Ozma, "why the fishes in the lake have brought about war between the Skeezers and the Flatheads." "Yes," Lady Aurex answered. "Now that you know the story, it is easy to understand. The Sudic and his wife came to our lake hoping to catch the silverfish, or goldfish, or bronzefish. Any one of them would do, and by destroying it, deprive Coo ee oh of her magic. Then they could easily conquer her. Also, they had another reason for wanting to catch the fish. They feared that in some way the three adepts might regain their proper forms, and then they would be sure to return to the mountain and punish Rora and the Sudic. That was why Rora finally tried to poison all the fishes in the lake. At the time, Coo ee oh transformed her into a golden pig. Of course, this attempt to destroy the fishes frightened the queen, for her safety lies in keeping the three fishes alive." "I suppose Coo ee oh will fight the Flatheads with all her might," observed Dorothy. "And with all her magic," added Ozma thoughtfully. "I do not see how the Flatheads can get to this island to hurt us," said Lady Aurex. "They have bows and arrows, and I guess they mean to shoot the arrows at your big dome and break all the glass in it," suggested Dorothy. But Lady Aurex shook her head with a smile. "They cannot do that," she replied. "Why not?" "I dare not tell you why, but if the Flatheads come tomorrow morning, you will see for yourselves the reason." "I do not think they will attempt to harm the island," Ozma declared. "I believe they will first attempt to destroy the fishes by poison or some other means. If they succeed in that, the conquest of the island will not be difficult." "They have no boats," said Lady Aurex, "and Coo ee oh, who has long expected this war, has been preparing for it in many astonishing ways. I almost wish the Flatheads would conquer us, for then we would be free from our dreadful queen. But I do not wish to see the 3 transformed fishes destroyed, for in them lies our only hope for future happiness." "Ozma will take care of you, whatever happens," Dorothy assured her. But the Lady Aurex, not knowing the extent of Ozma's power, which was, in fact, not so great as Dorothy imagined, could not take much comfort in this promise. It was evident there would be exciting times on the morrow if the Flatheads really attacked the Skeezers of the Magic Isle. And that's the end of Chapter 9 and the end of our reading for today. So come back tomorrow to find out if the war happens and what goes on between the Flatheads and the Skeezers. So please do come back tomorrow, and until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.